Okay, welcome everybody. Again, please feel free to keep putting information in the chat. If you have questions for our speaker this evening, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. That should be functioning. And also, there's a little reaction button, a little heart at the bottom of your screen. If you don't want to see emojis on the screen, you can click that little up arrow and hide those, or you can use them. So welcome this evening. My name's Dana Ripper, and Ethan Duke is also with us with the Missouri River Bird Observatory, or MRBO. MRBO is dedicated to the conservation of birds and all wildlife and the habitats that sustain us all. And we use the tools of science, education, and policy advocacy to fulfill our mission. We would like to welcome you to International Dark Sky Week, that is this week. Our speaker this evening will tell you a lot more about that, and we'll also be putting some resources into the chat throughout the course of the evening. Given the fact that the majority of our migrant birds make their migratory journeys at night, reducing light pollution, especially at this time of year during spring migration and in fall migration, but really all year round, it's an important part of how we can help birds and other wildlife as well. But our friend and colleague, Dr. Vayu Gokale, is with us tonight to tell us the many important ways that dark skies will benefit us and how to reach the goal of having nicer, darker skies at night. So Vayu Gokale is a professor of physics and astronomy at Truman State University. He earned his BSc in physics and MSc in nuclear physics from the University of Bombay, followed by a PhD in astronomy from Louisiana State University. He is presently training to be a master gardener and will be taking a master pollinator steward course this fall. He lives just outside of Kirksville, Missouri with his wife, Michelle, two young kids, a dog, and a cat. Dr. Gokale maintains his sanity by watching Seinfeld, Quentin Tarantino movies, and listening to dad rock. He loves the night sky in America's national parks and dreams of someday becoming an astronomy park ranger at Arches National Park in Utah, which we hope continues to exist. He is also, I have to say, a fellow Gen Xer who employs very pertinent movie references and engages in snark very appropriately. My friend, please tell us about the stars and what we can do for our dark skies.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you for that introduction. Please let me know if you can't hear me. I can speak louder. I'll try and speak slowly because, I tend to rush through things, so I'll try and keep that going. But in case you notice I'm going too fast, just let me know. So I'll go ahead and share my screen if it lets me. There we go. Can you all see my screen? All right.
Yes.
So the title of the talk, as you can see, is Monarchs, Milkweed, and the Milky Way. And I want to try and do a couple of things in this talk. And I'm also want to clarify what I'm not going to try and do in the talk, but I'm happy to answer questions later. I want to set the stage in terms of how the Milky Way is connected to each one of us, and try and kind of emphasize that point, especially since my background is in astronomy, and that is how I arrived at this topic, if you will, as a major source for my research as well as activism, and just generally occupies me quite a bit as an astronomer. But I moved beyond that, and as Dana mentioned, I'm trained to be a master gardener, and then eventually hope to become a master naturalist as well. And that's where the monarchs and the milkweed and all the other stuff and birds and everything comes in. So I want to try and start off with a kind of a grand scale of the Milky Way, and then kind of converge onto and connect that aspect to nature around us on our planet. And then I'm going to quickly talk about why darkness at night is related to other conservation efforts that you may already be involved in or be more familiar with, in terms of natural habitat, getting rid of invasives, chemical pollution of our water, our air, contamination of our soil, that sort of thing. And I want to bring in preserving darkness at night, try and bring preserving darkness at night to the same level as all these other efforts that have been going on for a long time and are probably more familiar to most people. So that's kind of the scale of it. And then, and towards the end of the talk, the last 10 minutes or so, I want to go through specific examples of how you can go about searching online or at your local Home Depot or Menards, whatever store you have access to or like to go to, in terms of what kind of lighting fixtures and lights you can actually get from these stores and online vendors that are consistent with uh, maintaining darkness at night. Another thing I'll say at the get-go is I am making a conscious effort to avoid using the term light pollution too often. Um, Not because of any kind of political or whatever aspects that go with the word pollution these days, but more in terms of I think there is value in emphasizing what we need to preserve rather than just continually harp about what we have lost. And again, the two are not mutually exclusive. Obviously, one is related to the other, but talking about the benefits of darkness at night in my view, or at least I'm evolving toward that view, that talking about the benefits of darkness of night might be more, might compel people to act about it more than simply pointing out what is wrong, if you will, with our outdoor lighting habits. So that's kind of the overall scope, if you will, of the talk. And like I said, I'll try and catch myself if I use the word light pollution too lightly. I might use it when it is pertinent, but just addressing this entire topic more in terms of preserving dark skies because of its benefits rather than reducing light pollution because of bad effects has its own value, I think, to put the positive spin on it rather than the negative connotation. Anyway, without further ado, let's get going. Firstly, let me acknowledge several of the entities that I have interacted with especially in the last 5 years or so. The funding for some of my work comes from the Missouri Space Grant Consortium. I am a member of Dark Sky Missouri, which is part of Dark Sky International. It's the Missouri chapter. And my home institution, Truman State University, has been very supportive of my work, both at a personal level as well as in terms of what we are trying to achieve. We've raised almost $100,000 to fix the lights on our campus, and that process has taken a while. It has taken 3 or 4 years, but given these large institutions have institutional inertia, so to keep at it, there's been no resistance. There's been no pushback or anything. It's just like these things take time. Just as this is an idea, we're talking 3 to 4 year time scales. If you're talking about institution level change, at least maybe even longer. Um, Missouri Parks Association, MOPSI, the Missouri Bird Conservation Initiative, and then the Conservation Federation of Missouri have all funded our work at various levels. I'll talk about that if we have time. That's not the main purpose of the talk, but I want to acknowledge their support. And then a lot of our volunteers, people who are involved in some of our dark sky advocacy and research are Missouri naturalists, Missouri National Naturalists. Of course, MRBO has been very supportive. In fact, I would say a lot of these connections that we have made with MOPSI, CFM, and the Parks Association and Master Naturalists have been thanks to the direction and guidance given by Ethan and Dana over the past few years. And like I mentioned, I'm becoming a master gardener, and I've talked to my local chapter about dark skies as well, but I do intend to pursue that on a statewide scale once, as and when I actually do become a master gardener myself. Dana mentioned this, but this is International Dark Sky Week, and so it is basically an excuse, if you will, for us dark sky advocates to talk a little bit more about it than usual. There are star parties organized. I'm in fact going to a star party here in Kirksville right after this talk at our observatory here, and we have another event on Friday at Thousand Hills State Park, which became the first state park to be designated the urban night sky place by Dark Sky International last year in November, and that was a good achievement for us, a recognition for the park for the efforts it is making to maintain dark skies over the park itself. So I invite you to look out for events around your communities and participate in them. If not this year, it's too late for that. Kind of put it on your radar somewhere that next year around this time, second, third week of April is usually when we have our dark sky, International Dark Sky Week. So keep an eye out for that. I'll also say that this Saturday there is a Birds, Bees, and Blooms festival down in Arrow Rock where MRBO is. And so if any of you are actually coming to this event, I will be there along with one of my colleagues from Dark Sky. So we'll have a table with a few demos and handouts and such. So if you missed something or you want to pursue a topic in more detail and we don't have time tonight, then you can catch me there, and then we can discuss things in more detail. Okay, so it's springtime in the United States right now, at least in terms of the weather. Everything else, some of the other things might seem a little more dire, but it's nice outside. The weather's getting a little bit better. Yes, we had a few storms last couple of days, but that should help regenerate some of our garden beds and wildlife and the insects that we have a love-hate relationship with. Um, but that's coming along, and it is kind of a bittersweet um, kind of feeling for some of us who see nature come back to life and yet are worried about what's going to happen. Will my children get to experience the monarchs? Will my children ever get to experience a beautiful night sky? Will my children ever see thousands and thousands of birds flying in the sky? And you can hear them at night. Will that world still exist 30, 40 years from now? Kind of brings those feelings up when you see all this new life come along. Then, yeah, it looks great now, but what about the future? So, just to put that in perspective. Like I mentioned, the talk includes the term Milky Way, so I am going to um, start from a relatively grand scale and start from the beginning. Well, not quite the beginning. We won't talk about the Big Bang and such, but we'll talk about a few million years after the Big Bang. We already had galaxies forming. Galaxies form out of clumps of gas and dust. Originally, when the universe formed, it mainly contained hydrogen and helium, and that's it. Trace amounts of lithium, beryllium, and boron. But there was no carbon, there was no oxygen, there was no iron, there was no calcium, there was no phosphorus, zinc, or any other things out of nitrogen out of which our bodies are made. None of it existed until galaxies started forming. And one such clump of gas and dust collapsed into what then eventually became our Milky Way galaxy. And this is an artist's imagination, if you will, of what the Milky Way might look like if we could travel a million light years above the galactic plane and look down upon it. This is what the Milky Way would look like. It has a concentrated center, and our solar system is about two-thirds of the way out from the center in one of the spiral arms. And notice that the spiral arms, there's a lot of white, which is just basically stars. You see some magenta clumps over there. Again, this is an artist's rendition, but they try to make it as realistic as possible. And we'll look at some of these magenta colored clumps on the next slide. On the right panel, the solar system is in the middle of the picture here, in the middle of the bullseye, if you will. And you see the Sagittarius arm, so you see the constellation of Sagittarius towards the south. Maybe a couple of months from now, in June, July, you'll start seeing it towards the southeast as it gets dark. And then the Perseus arm is in kind of the opposite anti-direction of the center of the Milky Way. The center of the Milky Way is up here, just to the left of the Sagittarius arm as is shown. So when we go out into the night sky and use a telescope, some of these magenta colored clumps, one of the most famous one is the Orion Nebula. And this is a zoomed in picture of the Orion Nebula. This picture is almost 25 years old, taken by Rob Gendler, who's actually a doctor in New York, but has telescopes down in Arizona and New Mexico. And so he's been doing this for a long time. This image actually is a Hubble image. And you see this, you can almost see a three-dimensional pattern to this, even though it's a two-dimensional image, is a star-forming region. Here's where stars form, and all these bright blue stars you're seeing are relatively young stars that are formed in one of these little clumps in our Milky Way that you see scattered here and there in our galaxies, these little magenta clumps that you see. Well, our own sun then formed somewhere in here. We saw the solar system form somewhere two-thirds of the way from the center, one-third of the way out from the center in one of these arms. And our solar system formed thusly similar pattern. You have a gas cloud, it collapses, the center part of it gets hotter and hotter, eventually starts fusing hydrogen into helium and helium into carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and such. And the rest of the gas settles around in a disk, which then slowly clumps because of gravitational instabilities. And eventually, some of those clumps, if everything works out, turn into planets. We think this repeats itself over and over again in other stars around our galaxy. So you have our universe, the gas clumps scattered across the universe, which eventually form galaxies. Within the galaxy, gas clumps collapse to form stars, and around stars, some of the gas and dust then collapses into forming planets. So that's a brief history of our solar system formation. Apart from hydrogen and helium, this is our periodic table. Apart from hydrogen and helium up here, everything else, pretty much everything else, is formed inside or around stars. And so every oxygen molecule that you're breathing right now, every oxygen atom that is in the water that three-fourths of your body is made up of, every iron atom that is part of your blood, every calcium atom that is part of your bones and teeth was inside a star at some point. And that's our connection to the stars. That's our connection to our galaxy, the Milky Way, out of the gas and dust that is in it, that we formed. Eventually, this stuff, a lot of this stuff is brought to us via comets, and this is a picture of a comet in early or late twilight, I suppose, from last year. And the comets have these tails, and these tails and comets are basically dirty balls of ice. And that ice, sometimes when the comet comes close enough to the Earth, lands on the Earth. And this happened 4.5 billion years ago with more regularity. There were more comets coming in. Most of them were gobbled up either by Jupiter or the Sun. But some of them survived and got close enough to the Earth to rain down the snow and ice and water droplets. Half of, best estimates, half of all the water that we see in our oceans came to us from comets. At least half of it came from comets. And so we have all these objects in the sky, the Milky Way itself, the thousands of stars, comets, and other things. And essentially every single atom and molecule, like our own DNA, for example, each of those atoms that constitute the DNA, the oxygen, the carbon, the nitrogen, et cetera, were all part of stars. And so that's a connection to the Milky Way, and that's how our system works. Earth, lucky enough to be at a distance in which liquid water can exist on the surface, eventually develop life. And we now have this stable system where microbes have a role to play, insects have a role to play, birds have a role to play, wild animals, apex predators, human beings all have a role to play in maintaining this equilibrium in our Earth system that is reasonably stable. It has served this planet well because we have survived meteor strikes that wiped out pretty much all life on our planet except a few species, and life came back. Volcanoes and earthquakes were much more frequent 2, 3, 4 billion years ago. Uh, Life survived all of that and it made it to this point, despite being in a relatively harsh environment, at least initially. If you look at our atmospheric composition, look at the last column over here. You have carbon dioxide is essentially trace on in our planet's atmosphere. Nitrogen is dominant, almost 79, 80%, and oxygen is about 20%. These two essentially add up to 100. Everything else is essentially trace in terms of composition. And that's all largely thanks to life. It's thanks to microorganisms that essentially reduce carbon dioxide, take the oxygen out, and release it into the atmosphere. Oxygen is a very reactive gas, so it combines with other stuff. Everything rusts, right? I mean, oxygen combines with stuff. But note, without life, our composition would be essentially identical to Venus and Mars, our nearest neighbors. We would basically be a hot hell of, extreme greenhouse heating because our atmosphere will essentially be a thick blanket of carbon dioxide. Why do I bring all this up when I'm talking about darkness at night? Well, this is our connection to our location in our galaxy, our solar system, our location in our galaxy. Being lucky enough that life originated here and managed to survive despite all possible, you know, obstacles thrown in the way. And we need to value that. And one way in which we can appreciate that connection, where we actually come from, is being able to at least have the option of seeing where it all started. And it all started in our galaxy. It started in the Milky Way. The comets that we see occasionally, if we go to dark skies, is where all the water that we have, or at least most of the water we have, came from. And I think if we lose that connection, if we forget, in essence, where it all started, how it all started, then there's the danger of us losing ourselves. We're already halfway or more than halfway there. We've lost track of what it is to be human and how we are connected to the rest of our natural world, both on the ground as well as in the sky. And that's the connection also between advocacy for maintaining natural conditions on the ground, but we also have to maintain natural conditions in the sky because that's how we got started. That's where we all came from. Whether you're religious or believe in some supernatural power or whatever, there is scientifically no denying the fact that the oxygen that you're breathing right now was in the interior of a star, was manufactured in the interior of a star somewhere. That's just scientifically true. You may choose to ignore that, but um, that's your choice. That doesn't make it true. Life evolved over 4 billion years. We find fossils that are 4 billion, billion with a B. Yet humans, as we exist today, Homo sapiens, arrived on the scene only a million years ago. That's less than 1% of the time that life has existed on our planet. And until a few hundred years ago, if you went out at night as a butterfly, as a moth, as a primate, or any other organism, you got access to a natural sky. And so let's see what the characteristics of a natural sky are. During daytime, the sky tends to be blue in color. There's a scientific reason for this. Um, Clouds tend to be white in color. You see some wispy clouds here behind one of these trees on the left-hand side here, but the sky otherwise is blue. And all living organisms take blue light going into their optical sensor, generally eyes, to be a sign that it is daytime. And so blue light triggers daytime responses. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure is a little high. You're alert to both possibilities, predators hunting you, or you being a predator as well, looking for food, either in terms of fruit and vegetables or other animals. So that triggers, blue light triggers that reaction, if you will, in us automatically. That's how we have evolved. Our brain doesn't have to instruct our body, hey, be alert. It just automatically does it. It's a natural process. As day turns to night, you get twilight, generally associated with hues of yellow and orange and even red on occasion. And that again triggers in our bodies and that of most living organisms, at least terrestrial ones, the ones that don't live underground. It triggers, okay, it's getting dark if you're going from day to night, or if it's the other way, then it's the other way. That, okay, you need to relax a little bit, the heart rate can go down, you're safe now, let's go home, or whatever you call home, go there and be safe. And then when it's nighttime, of course, it gets dark. And then if you're lucky enough to live in a dark enough part of the country, you get to see nighttime phenomena. I showed you a few comets earlier, or at least one comet earlier. You saw the Milky Way, but here are other phenomena that are happening quite a bit over the past 2 years. The sun is really active, so we have a lot of northern light action. This is from my front yard. My house is to the left there, behind the tree. And I'm lucky enough to live north of my town, so the northern skies are relatively clear, and our north stars, that one over there. And just a beautiful, beautiful view of the northern lights. It's of course a time lapse picture here. So this is what your our Milky Way should look like. This is taken from Flagstaff. I'll show you a picture I took from my observatory in a few minutes. And that brings us again to darkness at night. This is what natural darkness or natural daytime looked like 600, 500 years ago until the advent of nighttime lighting. And we made progress, if you will. The Industrial Revolution happened. We figured out how to harness energy to do stuff for us, right? Energy and work are two sides of the same coin. You can use energy to do some work for us. And once we figured that, of course, things changed. And so in the last 100, 200 years, we went from essentially primitive animals to what we call modernized or civilized. And I'm putting air quotes on it because it depends on the context, right? What do you exactly mean by that? So here we are. At this point, I want to quote from one of the books that kind of I'd read a long time ago, forgot all about it. I didn't forget about it, but kind of, it didn't connect with me until about 4 or 5 years ago as to how what I had read maybe 15, 20 years ago connected to all this dark sky stuff that I'm involved in now. Some of you will recognize the book right away once I read a couple of quotes. There was once a town in the heart of America where all life seemed to live in harmony with its surroundings. And then the author goes on to say a few other things and then says, then a strange blight crept upon the area and everything began to change. Some evil spell had settled on the community. Mysterious maladies swept the flocks of chickens, the cattle and sheep sickened and died. Everywhere was a shadow of a death. Some of you might recognize the book, and I would say this was written in the context of artificial use of chemicals in our natural environment to grow better crops, this, that, and the other. I can make the same argument with light that there are organisms suffering in our neighborhood because of our irresponsible use of outdoor lighting. If you hadn't already recognized, this is the first few pages of Rachel Carson's book from the 60s, Silent Spring. And again, it is both reassuring as well as disturbing to read these, even just the first 5 or 10 pages of Rachel Carson's book and realize, oh, there was someone 50, 60, 70 years ago thinking exactly the way I like to think about these sorts of things. So that's reassuring. And that's also at the same time disturbing, is that what have we been doing for the past 50, 60 years? We just keep repeating our mistakes over and over again. So it's frustrating in that regard. Uh, but I figured that's another connection point that you can replace wherever she basically implies pesticides, you can replace it with artificial light and you'll be fine. And so a natural night sky that should look like this now looks like this. So this is a 5-minute exposure that I took in Flagstaff, and you see the Milky Way. You see some of those magenta clumps as well that I mentioned. This is not the Orion Nebula. This is in the Milky Way. And these are star-forming regions in the Milky Way. And if I take even a 1-minute exposure in Kirksville, it just washes out. There's so much artificial ambient light that if I were to take a 5-minute exposure, it would just look white in color because there's so much light bouncing that I actually don't have access to that darkness in the sky itself because of all the foreground light that is just bouncing around. These are sky glow pictures from about 200 miles away at various national and state parks and historic sites across the United States. And some parts are worse, like you see Washington, D.C. is essentially washed out, or Rock Creek Park near Washington, D.C. is a lost cause. But even Smoky Mountains, you see the light creeping in from the eastern corridor. Some of it you also see is also coming from places like Nashville and Knoxville and things like that, Gatlinburg nearby, and so on. There's some places that are fine. You see in New Mexico, which is essentially a desert, or at least large parts of it are desert. There's still value. The band that you see in the sky is actually the Milky Way at Chaco Canyon, and then Death Valley looks reasonably unperturbed. Those mountains doing a lot of good work by blocking some of the light from the rest of California. So this is a busy plot, but basically it's the illumination on the vertical axis and where the sun is at what altitude is over here. So zero altitude means the sun is on the horizon setting, so that's sunset over here. And the dark solid line is how bright is the sky. It's incredibly, insanely bright during the day. When there's clouds, of course, it's not as bright. And then at night, so this is twilight over here, that's civil twilight. This is astronomical twilight. This is nautical twilight. And you see the sky should be this dark if there were no stars in the sky, but there are stars in the sky, especially if the Milky Way is up. And so this is natural darkness. This is what you expect on a dark, cloudless, moonless night. If the moon is out, depending on the phase of the moon, the sky gets correspondingly brighter. This is again in a graph form, what I showed you earlier in pictures, right? The Milky Way and the stars and all that kind of good stuff. What we have done with artificial lighting is added so much light in our ambient environment, depending on whether you are out in the country, but you're only seeing sky glows, you're not in the midst of the lights, you're far away at 20, 30, 40, 50 miles away. That light still comes in and essentially mimics moonlight for the most part. And as you get deeper and deeper into a city, into an urban setting, your illumination levels in the middle of the night are just as bad as very early twilight. Most people live in urban settings over here. And so 80 to 90% of people in the United States now essentially live in perpetual twilight. They have never experienced absolute dark skies. They just don't know what darkness really is if you're outdoors. Indoors, you can do whatever you want, right? And that's exactly the point. Humans can do whatever they want indoors because they can have blackout curtains, you can put something on your eyes, whatever. What about the birds? What about insects and pollinators? What about other animals? What about our plants and trees? They don't have that choice. So they are now perpetually exposed to this artificial light at night, which essentially mimics twilight conditions. There's never absolute darkness. And that's a problem. So I compare light pollution with other forms of pollution, and I could do a whole talk on each of these topics here, but I'm going to kind of make the basic point that everything that you associate with chemical, and I'm using chemicals as essentially a proxy for contamination of water, contamination of our soil, contamination of air, right? Because ultimately it's some of the other form of chemical that goes into the water or air or soil that contaminates it. Every possible bad effect you get from chemical pollution, you also get from light pollution. It's not the exact same thing. The evidence for chemical pollution is much stronger because we have been studying it for much longer. Light pollution, the data are somewhat insufficient, largely suggestive or indicative or consistent with harm caused in these different settings to different kinds of animals and humans. But there is absolutely no evidence that says that, oh, death doesn't occur because of light pollution. No, it does. Birds collide with buildings because they're attracted to cities and towns because of light pollution. We know this. Same with growth patterns. They have done research now on people who work in hospitals at night time, and the rate of breast cancer in women who spend a lot of time, especially in hospital type or bright settings, the rate seems to be higher. It is consistent with it. We haven't proven that yet, or there isn't solid evidence for it because we only started doing this 10 or 15 years ago. We'll need more time. But every indicator shows that whatever bad effects chemicals in our environment cause, light causes as well. Here's another list of similarities and differences between chemical and light pollution. Again, you don't have to go through all this. The PowerPoint will be made available to you, so you can, if you are someone who, is a lawyer or something, you can follow up with me regarding, what kind of costs we're talking about and that sort of thing. But the one thing that I want to point out, and I've kind of overstated the case a little bit over here, is that to fix chemical pollution, to fix our streams, to fix the contamination in our oceans, to save the corals in the bottom of our ocean, to reduce acidification of our oceans, is gonna take an enormous effort, and it's something we have to do. But we are talking decades, if not century, time scales here, because even if we literally stop using all fossil fuels right now, there's so much inertia in our Earth system that it will still take several decades, if not centuries, before we can turn this Titanic around. Whereas with light pollution, even though the harm caused by light pollution is very similar to harm caused by chemical pollution, light pollution is relatively inexpensive to fix because we already have the technical solutions for it. And it's literally as easy as turning off the light switch. It's a little more complicated than that, but in terms of technical ability, do we have lights that are less disruptive to the environment? Yes. Do we have light fixtures that are less disruptive to the environment? Yes. Do we have the technology to turn the light off when we don't need it? Yes. So we check all the boxes that we need to fix the problem. We already have the technical solutions. The problem is not the technical solution. The problem is, again, inertia, institutional inertia, human inertia. We just like to do things the way we have been doing it yesterday. It's very hard to change our habits. So that's the fight we have. So again, to highlight the point, and again, generalizing to a certain extent, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring essentially was a call to action to say, hey, let's be responsible about how we are using artificial chemicals in our natural environment. Let's stop using, or at least reduce significantly the using of pesticides unless we really have to, and find more eco-friendly alternatives like herbicides, for example. Recently, in the last 5, 10 years, Doug Tallamy's books have really made an impact on a large section of the society. And again, generalizing basic messages: we need native plants, we need natural habitat, we need to get rid of invasives and all these exotic plants we got from Asia and Europe because they look pretty. There's a place for that, but it shouldn't be the only thing you have in your yards. Instead, grow native plants and native pollinators so that you can attract butterflies and insects and whatnot. And similarly, we don't have an equivalent book, a popular level book in the light pollution community. So that's a hole that I'm telling people who know much more than me to fix, people who are more articulate than me to fix, is to write a book along the lines of Talamy's book and Carson's book, which brings about these points. This talk is essentially it's kind of a modest attempt to kind of make the same point, but we need something that reaches many, many more people. Is that essentially we need to use light wisely, and we need to minimize blue light in our nighttime environment, because blue light is what causes more harm than, say, amber colored light. So here's a quote, and again, I challenge you to tell me who this quote comes from. We can no longer afford to consider air and water common property, free to be abused by anyone without regard to the consequences. Instead, we should begin now to treat them as scarce resources, which we are no more free to contaminate than we are free to throw garbage into our neighbor's yard. And again, this was said in the context of air pollution and water pollution and soil contamination. You can easily see this exactly in the context of darkness at night. Darkness at night is a scarce resource. We should not be free to contaminate that by freely shining light into our neighbor's yard. This light that is not useful, is shining where it doesn't need to shine, is wasted. It is basically garbage. And so we have to bring that idea into our psyche as well, that when I say, hey, you can't throw garbage, you can't push contaminated water into my yard, or throw garbage in my yard, well, you shouldn't be allowed to shine unnecessary light into my yard or into my bedroom window either. So how do we do responsible lighting? I'll just quickly point out 4 main points. Do you need light? What is the directionality of the light? Is it going where it needs to go? Is it the appropriate level of lighting? And then the color temperature, which I want to spend a couple of minutes on. The color temperature is a measure of how blue or amber colored the light is. And generally speaking, the higher the color temperature, the worse off the light is for the environment. So anything above, I would say, 5,000 Kelvin should be a strict no-no. Just don't use it. I would say don't even use it indoors. I mean, if you have to, if you're in a hospital and conducting an operation, sure, go ahead and have, light it up to the wazoo and use as high a color temperature as you like. That's not the bigger problem is not the light. You're trying to save someone's life. I get it, but it's especially outdoors. But even in your day-to-day environment at night, use 3,000 Kelvin or below. So yellow, off-white, or yellow colored, or outdoors, you should surely use amber color lighting, which is close to 2,000 Kelvin. These details are mentioned on any light bulb that you buy, either online or at Walmart or whatever. And look for the color. The lumen depends on the application. Is it a night light? Is it a bathroom light? Is it a reading light? Are you just leaving some light on because TV is on, that sort of thing? You can adjust that to your liking. And the most important point, which is more technical, this is broad stroke, this is true, but really what you want is minimize blue light in your nighttime environment. So this is a color spectrum of what color of light is coming out from a given light bulb. And this one is just ugly. There's just no question about it. This is bad. It has some good elements to it, but still bad. The green peak and the blue peak here is not good for you, so it's bad. And this is the ideal one. This is good because there's minimal amount of blue light. Now, this you may not always find on the light bulb when you go to buy it. If you buy it online, you can ask for it. if you buy it online. You can send an email to the retailer and they'll usually have this information. So why do we value the darkness at night? Let me run through that quickly. And like I said, this is not something I want to emphasize in this talk. I want to go on for about 3 or 4 minutes with this and then jump on to, okay, fine, we get all this. Where do I buy good products? I want to spend about 10, 15 minutes on that towards the end of the talk. Here's a picture of a highway in Illinois. This study was published by the Illinois Department of Transportation. You can't quite see where the light posts are here, but you can tell where they are because note where the soybean field is still green. You can see these kind of semicircular um, uh, patterns where the soybean hasn't ripened, whereas it has over here. Now, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing if this happens, but it clearly shows that the presence of light posts over here has influenced the behavior of this particular field. You would have seen it here as well, but they have mowed this. It's hard to tell what's going on over here because here you can actually see some of the posts, but you can't on the other side. But you can see the pattern of the color of the crop. Here's another one where during fall, these leaves have fallen off, but because there is warmth from this light, these leaves here effectively, in a manner of speaking, think it is warmer than it actually is because it's getting warmth from the light, and so it doesn't shed as fast. So again, you can't argue which one is good or bad. It is unnatural though because of this artificial light. So quick run through as to why we should care about lighting. It affects human health. It is increasingly affecting human safety while crossing roads or while driving because of those incredibly bright LED lights that shine into our eyes. I already mentioned a few things about bird migration, and then pollinators are attracted towards lights. And instead of doing their thing out in the garden, in the forest, they're buzzing around your light, which is annoying to you, and then you find them dead the next day under the light because they can't help themselves. And of course, if you use light wisely, then you will save greenhouse emissions or reduce greenhouse emissions and preserve precious natural resources. So responsible lighting will help us in all these regards. And so we should use our outdoor lights responsibly. Here's a picture of depiction of migration of the monarch butterflies, for example, coming along right now, just about reaching southern parts of Missouri. And as summer rolls along, you'll start seeing them in our gardens, on our milkweeds and whatnot. And we want to keep our nighttime environment dark. There's increasing research that shows that the monarchs actually like to rest at night and they actually migrate during the day, which is the opposite pattern than what birds tend to do. But if there is too much light in the environment, they think it's still daytime, especially if there's blue light, and they keep flying instead of resting, which again then exhausts them, and then they're less likely to make it where they're going because they're just perpetually exhausted, which is what happens to humans, for example. Birds, on the other hand, and this is a picture from Birdcast for tonight, tend to follow riverways. So you have the mighty Mississippi over here, and you see, it kind of doesn't exactly follow it. And then, of course, the coastlines, because again, a lot of water. Humans like water, so we live around waters, more light pollution near water bodies, and birds and animals like to migrate along water bodies because there's more food along there. So again, not a good combination of things. So we need to reduce our light pollution to help these birds get to from point A to point B without getting distracted by artificial light. So how do you preserve darkness at night? And the idea is very simple. And here I call on a quote from Doug Tallamy, where he says that humans are not genetically programmed to care about the future. And this is Doug Tallamy speaking, I will not be asking for sacrifices that will build a better world later on. That's not what I'm asking. I will suggest action that will heal our damaged landscape right now, actions that create immediate short-term gains. That such actions will also deliver long-term ecological benefits is just the icing on the cake. And again, he's talking about this in terms of natural habitat, reducing lawns and invasives, not contaminating your yards with too many chemicals, that sort of thing. Again, you can make the exact same argument about your outdoor lights. There's no need for us to have this indiscriminate lighting. You can fix that and it will give you short-term benefits. You will enjoy your ambience better. Your pollinator garden will be better off because of good lighting, and it will lead to long-term benefits as well, but you don't have to worry about that. You will actually benefit by saving money looking better, and having better gardens and pollinators in your yard. And it's very simple to fix this. It is common sense. I would argue that, people of a certain age already know this. I will tell my grandmother when she was around, and if I left the room and left the light open, she would raise hell. She would say, "You're not coming back. You're going outside to play or whatever. Why did you leave the light on?" I'm like, "Sorry," and I turn it off. To this day, I turn it off. When I leave the room and I know I'm not coming back or someone else not coming in, I turn off the light. Practically none of my students do that. They just leave the room and don't turn off the light. Why? So turn it off if you don't need it. So if the light is not needed, turn it off. Make sure it goes where it needs to go. Use appropriate level is what I would say instead of low level. Control it. So if there's motion sensors, use motion sensors. If there are timers, use timers. And then the warm colored business that I mentioned. Amber colored light, like my shirt is better than blue colored light. Again, blue color for millions of years has signified blue light going into your optical organ has signified daytime, and you don't want that at night. Here's a pictorial representation of the same. In the interest of the time, I'll skip. One point I will make, because this is a reflex reaction that people say, "Oh, you turn off all the lights, you're going to be unsafe or whatever." This is the same picture, one with these lights blocked off by the hand, one without. There's a person standing over here. If you squint hard enough, you can kind of make out the outline because you know they're there, and you can see them clearly in this picture, but not. The notion that more light makes you safe is completely wrong and misplaced. Anyone who has driven a car on a single lane with the other car coming the other way with its headlights on, and with today's lights, you don't even need them to be on highs. Just regular lights knows this, that just because there's more light in the environment doesn't mean you're safe. It's like going into a dark room with a flashlight. And this genius, once they get into the dark room, says, "Oh, it's very dark over here. Let me shine some light," and shine straight into your eyes. Who does that? Right? Who does that? Nobody does that. And yet you see our applications of outdoor lighting, they do exactly that. They shine light straight into your eyes rather than towards the ground where it is needed. And then you wonder, why can't I see well? Why do I feel uncomfortable? Why do I have a headache when I go for a night walk? And why am I not safe, really? You may feel safe because you see these lights. This guy's just standing right there. He's not even hiding. He's just standing right there and you don't see it. Here's another example of the same. Now, these lights are good colored lights, the one on the left. They are unshielded. So they cast a really dark shadow. And you can't see what's going on under it. Whereas these lights, the color I'm not a big fan of, but they're pointed straight down, and I can see this guy or gal who's standing over here just fine. So again, directionality matters a lot. Light, if it goes straight into your eyes, is not good for you. Here's another example of good, well-shielded light. This was not well-shielded. This one is. You could argue there's actually more light going on the porch than it did over here, or at least your vision is less impaired. It's a beautiful example of lighting your garden, if you will, in New Mexico, where you get the light where you want it. You can't see the lights. You can't see the actual light. You can see the light from the light, but you can't see the actual light. That's what you want. These are examples from Texas and Flagstaff. And again, beautiful lighting. This is an oil refinery, for heaven's sake. And they have even taken this up, saying, "Why are we shining this light up into the sky and sideways and all over the place? Let's light up what we want to light up, which are these pipes and containers and whatnot. That's what we want protected. So if I'm standing here, I can see it well. Otherwise, the light's glaring into my eyes. I can't see what's going on in front of me." How do you find responsible lighting products? So I'll spend about 5-6 minutes here and then invite questions. I'm at 44 minutes right now, so let's go for 5 more minutes. If you scan this QR code, you will go to the lighting products page. I'm actually going to escape out of it and actually open that page for you. So let me know if you can actually see the screen. You can go to the dark sky approved page. You can scan that link, and I'll post this into the chat as well. I posted in the chat. If you go there, you get these dark sky residential luminaires, commercial luminaires, comfort, whatever. Those are just icons. But you can actually search for the product based on various criteria, as you can see here. Let's just say you want to do residential lighting, and you want a back porch light. So let's say we're looking for a wall mount of some kind. Here are some options. There's hundreds of options here, a couple of caveats. Some of these are really pricey, like something that you could buy at Walmart for $50. Here it probably is $250. No one's asking you to do that. But some of these are not. Some of these are perfectly reasonable prices. So the very first one, actually, this one. Now, stylistically, this may not match what you want. So you can look for other options along similar lines. But you can just open this up. They have a link to where you can find the product. Doesn't give you the price, but you can see this is trans globe lighting. So just open a new tab. Let's say trans globe lighting, and then the code, and I had done this before we met for the talk just to make sure everything works out. The name of the product is 51340, right? That was the same name mentioned over here, which is 51340 or whatever it was. So you put that in. And here you are. And yeah, some of these are expensive, $85. You probably don't want to spend that much, but here's 60, here's 50. You just randomly search for wall pack, it's about 40, $50 anyway. This might be marginally more pricey. And even on top of that, just looking at the shape of it, you now have an idea of what you're looking for. And the idea here is the light bulb is way in over here, so the light falls down. You can't actually see the light bulb even when you're standing right next to the light. All of these you see are maybe not that one, but all of these you see are of that same type. And that's what you're looking for. So once you get that idea that, okay, that's what I'm looking for, you can go to your local Walmart or Home Depot or Menards or whatever, or Costco or whatever, and then say, okay, this is what I'm looking for, a well-shielded light where the light is completely recessed so that the light falls on the ground rather than every which way, which is basically this light over here at the bottom. Yeah, that's what it is. It's one of those kinds of lights you see here on the top as well. In Las Cruces house at the very top, you see these two lights are exactly like that. So this is one way in which you can easily find products. Just kind of go to the dark sky page, products page, and figure out what you want. Let's say you want to talk to your local city council to change some of the decorative post lights that you have. You live in this fancy neighborhood and you have those really ugly globe lights and you want to get rid of them. What are the options? Well, let's look at post lights because most of these are planted on posts like these. Let's look at the very first one. There are, again, hundreds of options. Like I said, a couple of caveats. One, some of these are very expensive, so forget about that. Some of these are 500, 600, $800. No one wants that. These posts are pricey. They cost between 150 to $300, even the cheap ones. And you don't want to go too cheap because then they'll fall apart. You don't want to go too pricey because you can't change more than a few. There's a sweet spot somewhere, and I'm not advocating or I'm not, kind of endorsing any of these products. I'm just saying they are easy to find. And because Dark Sky has arranged this in a way where you can go to the manufacturer's page, you can find retailers over here. You can find, where is it? Or on this one, you can actually just Google because this is an off-the-shelf product as it happens, so it doesn't have a specific retailer. So it's Satco is the name of the company. Satco. Nuo, which is the name of the lighting products. And so you can just go search for Satco and then search for 65890, blah, blah, blah. Do that, and boom, here we are. Not cheap. No one's saying it's cheap, but any outdoor lighting fixture you go and look is going to be a couple of $100. And what you're looking for here, again, you can find cheaper options. What you're looking for is whatever the fixture is, the light is on the top facing down. Most traditional fixtures have a light socket at the bottom, so you install the light bulb like this, the light goes every which way. Yeah. What you want is the light to be on the top end. Look at this. The light is on the top end, light is on the top end, light is on the top end, light is on the top end shining down, and there's an opaque hat on top, either an external hat like this, and the bulb sockets in over there, or the LED light fixture is embedded in your fixture like this, but everything's facing down. $250, I'll tell you, for a person individually, this is a lot. But if you go and talk to your city engineer or something and say, I have a lighting solution for you, these 25 downtown lights that we have, these terrible lights, we can fix them for about $250 each. They'll take it. Not right away because you still have to figure out where the money comes from, but they'll say, oh, and $250 per fixture, if I can fix these 25 or even 100 lights, that's money that we can eventually get. You don't have that just lying around that you can spend, but it is not an outrageous expense. Any renovation of any kind or on scale is not going to be $5,000. It's going to be $50,000. It's going to be 20, it's going to be $100,000. And this is doable in that type of scale. On top of that, you can call the vendor and you can ask about, so you can call Setco and you can ask about options. And they have options at the bottom here. No, they don't have it on this one. Where you have these spec sheets, but you can change it. So what is the lighting color? Is it 3000 Kelvin? Is it 2700 Kelvin? How many light, LEDs are embedded? All those are negotiable. You can talk to them and change things. I've done this, or we are doing this right now for lighting at Truman. So my point here is that on the products page, with some research, you can find something that is to your fancy. And even with this particular product, if you think this is too expensive for you, the 250, you now know what to look for. You want to look for a fixture in which you have a hat, the lights installed on top over here facing down. That's what you're looking for. That's well shielded lighting. Then the quality, how long does it last, color temperature, those things again you have to consider. But some of those, you have to do no matter what your product is. So like I said, I wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about different products. You can look for porch lights, you get porch lights, you can look for porch lights, street lamps, porch lights, basically the same. One thing I want to do show you is something called a star path, which might be an option for some of you, which is you have these beautiful options, and a town in Iowa actually has this, where they have
live from the internet's red carpet. It's Verbo.
I thought I muted it, sorry. All right, kill that. Where you have, you go over here, where you have glow in the dark paths. And if you want to just light up your driveway, hey, this will charge all day and just shine nicely at night. If if you're not paranoid about safety or legitimately scared about your safety, depends on your neighborhood, how your comfort level. This is a perfectly legitimate option. There are various scales, how bright you want something, you can do patterns. This particular company is based not in the United States, but there are options within the United States as well, which you can find with a little bit of Google searching and whatnot. And so, one of the challenges, if you will, with conservation efforts and all that is kind of carrying that guilt, right? Because you have to recycle, otherwise the planet's going to, the dogs, this, that, and the other. You're kind of scared, you're kind of made to feel bad about your regular day-to-day habits because it becomes a burden on you that, oh, so much plastic in my trash, this, that, and the other. And all those are legitimate concerns. We should fight them. But those will happen on a systemic scale. I will argue that light pollution is a relatively local problem. It's a global problem, but with local solutions. If you start with your own house and then move on to your neighbor and then to your city officials, local school, local university, local car dealership, local gas station, just start the conversation, but start with your own home and your own business. Slowly move outwards. We, Dark Sky, Missouri, are working with state parks and wilderness areas to fix lighting on their premises first, and then talk to neighboring towns and cities saying, hey, fix your lighting so people will come to our parks and stay overnight because our night skies are beautiful. And so just as we want to fix our air, we want to fix our water, we want to decontaminate our soil, we want to have natural native habitats, we also should have in our natural native habitat is included darkness at night. And we should start doing that moving forward. It shouldn't just be left to the astronomers or dark sky advocates. If you are a naturalist, if you care about native habitats, if you care about animals, birds, and plants, you should be a dark sky advocate as well. So I'll stop at that one, a few minutes over than I had initially planned, but not terribly long, I don't hope. And I certainly hope I haven't bored you by repeating some of the things that I have said many times and you guys have heard many times. So I'll stop now. I'll invite questions. I see there are a few questions already in the Q&A, so I'll start addressing those, but please continue to ask questions because the more questions you ask, the more I get to think about, okay, these are the kinds of things we need to address.
It looks like people did a good job, but most of their questions in the Q&A.
Okay,
Yeah.
I haven't actually looked at them, so okay. Any other Missouri state parks? Yeah, so we just got a small grant from the Missouri Parks Association as a kind of pilot project. And as a first step, we are having training park rangers on 6 state parks to have instruments to quantify the level of light pollution in their park, meaning they measure something called sky brightness, how bright is your sky. And we also have little meters that will help them study the lights that are on the park premises in terms of lumen levels and color temperature. So that when they, for example, order new products, if they have money to do so, then they can test those products and then employ them. So the first step is to quantify the problem, right? And then once they quantify the problem, they can figure out solutions. Long-term project, long-term goal of this project is uh, to get the park to develop what's called a light management plan so that it is embedded in the DNA of the park. And it's not just, oh, this person wants to do it, so they did it, and then the person moves or retires, and the next person comes in and does whatever they want. We don't want that. We want it like if you come in, just as you have codes about buildings, like you need to have water supply, air supply, that sort of thing. Lighting will be included at least for the buildings and facilities that are on the park. So there are 6 parks that I'm in touch with right now. There are more than 6, but the 6 that we have selected first come first serve in terms of where we will start this. But the goal is this is a pilot project, and we have 52 state parks in the state of Missouri. And the goal, in my head at least, is over the next 3 or 4 years, every single state park should have these devices and start this process. Then how far they take it is kind of up to them. We are here to help them. Solar light gardens are an issue because they are dark sky friendly in the sense that they don't shine light upwards. Most of them don't, but they do shine light sideways. I have a problem. One of my neighbors has installed one of these really bright set of solar lights, and they're fine because they don't shine upwards, but they shine straight into my house. I will say that I'm ashamed that I haven't actually talked to my neighbor about that, but I'm looking for an opportunity to do so. But that is something certainly worth considering. So yeah, solar garden lights, there aren't good products because they have a nice little cap and they have a solar cell on the top and the lights at the bottom, but it's not shielded enough that blocks the light sideways. And I haven't found a good product that actually does that. My alternative, like I said, to that is just put glow in the dark pebbles in your yard, and that should do it. Okay, let me answer the slightly easier questions first. The dark sky advocate is a long-winded answer. Qualifications for dark sky designation, there are several levels. The highest level is what's called International Dark Sky Park. For that, you have to have all your lights dark sky compliant, so fully shielded, amber color, automated, so you turn off and don't need them, that sort of thing. You need your sky to be yay dark, so you can't do it if you're in the middle of the city, because even though your lights on the park are fine, all this light from everywhere around is contaminating it. So that's the highest designation. But the urban night sky designation that Thousand Hills got the urban is, I know urban has many connotations, but urban really means close to a city, where the requirement is that the lights on the park are dark sky compliant. They do outreach and talk about dark skies and good lighting, responsible lighting, but their sky doesn't have to be dark because of the neighboring towns contamination. But the process has started to talk to the neighboring towns and all that kind of stuff. So it's I would say in some sense symbolic, the urban night sky place designation, that it recognizes the park's efforts in promoting responsible lighting. Doesn't necessarily mean the park itself is very dark. Now, Thousand Hills, as it happens, is reasonably dark because Kirksville's a really small town. It's very close. We are less than 3 miles from Thousand Hills, but um, that's what. But International Dark Sky Park, the threshold is much higher. I would say in Missouri, out of the 52 state parks, I would say about 10 to 15, just ballpark. Just I haven't studied this. I'm just saying because I know where they approximately are. So places like Grand Gulf, Echo Bluff could easily be an International Dark Sky Park because they have really dark skies there. But the question is, do they have all their lights properly dark sky compliant? I don't know the answer to that, but that's the kind of thing we want to work on with it. So I hope that answers the question. Indicate the level of awareness of the issue. I would say the awareness level is high, but I think it hasn't reached a threshold that translates to action. And that's part of the challenge. And I'm sure this is a similar challenge for, climate activists and, then I need to know this with the plastic situation. Like everyone understands plastic is bad, but then you go to the town hall meeting or you go to this stadium and they have plastic water bottles. What are you going to do? Not drink water? I mean, you can't help yourself. So it's how, you want to carry water bottles, that sort of thing, but it still hasn't reached that threshold. And that's part of what we're trying to do is just kind of get it from a point where, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't see as many stars as I used to 20 years ago. Oh, when we went to my grandfather's farm in Kansas, we could see hundreds. To take it from that level of like curiosity and intrigue to action is where the rub is. That's why part of my talk I dedicated like you can do this. These products are available. They're not insanely expensive. And generally these products are good quality products that will last longer, more than makeup or whatever additional cost you have upfront, that sort of thing. So anyway, so that kind of answers that. Okay, what does Dark Sky Advocate do? Dana has posted a link, I think, or did post a link earlier about Dark Sky Advocates. Um, and it depends. It depends on your level of interest, how much time you have, your level of expertise in one field or the other. It's multidisciplinary. Right? You could be a birder, you could be a pollinator person, you could be a master gardener or just a casual gardener, you could be a stargazer, you could be anybody, and you have a slice in this field where you can make it your niche in terms of how you want to talk about it with everybody else. But one of the main benefits of becoming a dark sky advocate, in my view, is they have forums and a Slack channel. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry. It's an online tool which you can use to communicate with other advocates. And they have resources beyond anything you could possibly use. Anything that you need. You need a slide on this. You need a product that does that. You need to talk to someone who is an expert in that. You will, in this particular field or that particular field, you will find them. If you're an advocate, you'll have access to this whole gamut of electronic resources, links, experts that you otherwise might not have access to. So that's the primary advantage of becoming a dark sky advocate, apart from other things. And then it invests you as well, right? If you call yourself a dark sky advocate or advocate for anything, it kind of makes you do something about it because now you are that person. So uh, that's how that works. Fear of the dark or something, and so there are many ways to answer this question about the darkness, fear of the dark. At some level, fearing the dark is perfectly natural. Just like fear of heights is perfectly natural, just like fear of traveling at high speeds is perfectly natural. Some people will never get over it. There's some people who will never fly in an airplane. They won't. They simply won't because they're so scared of flying and all that. And it's perfectly legitimate. It's so unnatural, right? A human being is not supposed to be 30,000 feet up in the sky. It's a perfectly natural. But what, like we tell our children, right? What is the cure to being scared or afraid of something? It's not that the fear goes away. You'll be borderline crazy if you're not scared of going into an airplane. But you have to overcome that fear, right? You have to say, I trust these people. I'd be extremely unlucky for something this to happen, but it's just as likely you're hit by a car while crossing the road. That's right. So you have to figure out ways to overcome the fear, and one way to do it is to set the example. You have to say, look, my yard is dark sky friendly, or this community is dark sky friendly, and so that's one level. It's just overcome the fear. The second point that I always make is we are not asking for dark ground. This is not the dark ground Missouri. This is dark sky Missouri. We at Truman State over here show that by using appropriate lighting, we get more lumens on the ground with less wattage. Yeah, wattage is what we pay for, right? That's the electricity bill comes from the wattage. Lumens is what you get by expending that money on electricity. You can get more lumens on the ground by using dark sky friendly lighting, which causes less glare. Glare makes it unsafe too. And so I always say that this, Tom Hanks has a saying when he's asked a question and he doesn't want to answer, he says, I reject the premise of your question. so, but in this case, it is true. I reject the premise that we are advocating for darker ground. We are actually saying quite the opposite. We're saying we'll get more lumens on the ground with less wattage, which will make it even more safer in your neighborhoods than you have it right now. So that's the other way to answer. So yes, at some level of natural fear of darkness is perfectly natural, but we're not saying that. We're not saying we're making it dark. We're in fact are doing quite the opposite. Okay, the technical question about the P surface, why is the pressure 60 times if we change it? Because carbon dioxide is incredibly heavy. It has two oxygen molecules and a carbon molecule. So if you take one molecule of uh, carbon dioxide, you take one molecule of nitrogen or one molecule of oxygen, carbon dioxide is that much more heavier than hydrogen or nitrogen or something like that. So that's what makes it. Climate change is so political. The Democrats. This is another place where actually other forms of conservation efforts and light pollution efforts are different. And again, there are multiple levels in which I can address this. I would say that light pollution, to be pedantic about this, light pollution is a political issue because it influences policy. We are asking for policy changes. So by definition, it becomes political, but it is not partisan. There's a difference. And it is not partisan for many reasons. One of the reasons is, and this is a point I made that which has not been appreciated even by people who are working in the field for a long time. But I'll take some credit for making this point. I would say that today, in today's society, the way it is, given the political inclinations of the correlation between geography and political ideology, I would argue that there are naturally more dark sky advocates on the right side of the political spectrum than the left side of the political spectrum because most, geographically speaking, a significant number of people who are to the right politically live in rural areas. They are the ones who actually experience darkness at night and have lived with it for at least hundreds of years, their parents, grandparents, etc., etc. Most of the people who are on the left of the political spectrum tend to live in cities and towns where you actually don't even experience dark skies anymore. And our children and our children's children are, if they continue to live in cities and towns, which is likely because that's how society is evolving, they will actually never experience the Milky Way. They will actually never experience northern lights. They will never experience the beauty of the night sky and will become less and less and less invested in it because they have never experienced it. And so we should avoid mistaking a political issue with a partisan issue. It is not a partisan issue. I would argue that many of the advocates for let me give an example. Just 4 days ago, or maybe last week, two Republicans in blood red Alabama introduced a dark sky resolution in the Alabama House, and it passed. There's a Republican supermajority in the House, and it passed, and it has gone to the Senate now. This is in blood red Alabama, and so it is not, like I said, it is political by definition because you're asking for a policy change. We want policy to be set which which is such that well shielded, full cutoff, less than 3000 K lights are should become the norm. When cities install their street lights, when power companies install lights, that should be legally required that they do that. That's the policy that we are pursuing, and hence it is political. It's not partisan. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, I'll put my email address in the chat. In case you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me. I will send the PowerPoint to Dana so she can either post it somewhere or email you the link to where I have put the PDF so you can access it. And I will be at Arrow Rock on Saturday, so you can catch me there.
Thank you, Vayu. On that note, I think you're going to a star party tonight for International Dark Sky Week, right?
I am actually, and it's beautiful, clear skies. I mean, we've got a ton of rain,
Nice.
but it is cleared up nicely.
Excellent. Well, we and hopefully a bunch of people that were on here tonight will see you on Saturday.
Sounds good. All right,
That's
thank
a lot of thumbs up you get there.
you. Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
I'll see you
See you
Saturday.
later.
Everybody.
Thank you.